All right, welcome to character creation or 3D character creation. So what we're going to do in this little thing here is just to kind of, this is more or less just an intro into Mudbox and the general interface and just sculpt a little something. I don't know, we'll think of something, right? That's what we're going to go for. All right, so you're going to install Mudbox. Hopefully it's installed at this point. It's going to open up. Now, the first time you open it up, you're actually going to end up with a window that I don't have here. It's going to say something like, what do you want the default navigation to be? There'll be two options. One's for one thing, I don't remember what it is, and the other one will be like the default hotkeys or something like that. You want to choose, click on the drop down and choose Maya. If for some reason you just left it at the Mudbox defaults, it's totally fine. We'll fix it in a second, okay? But choose Maya just because that way you'll be used to it if you use Unity or Maya, or really that's kind of the standard for most programs. Okay, so you're going to end up with something like this. What we're going to do is normally in Mudbox what you do is you actually make a model in another program, bring it in here and you sculpt it. But it is possible to actually start from scratch in here, and that's what we're going to do. So you'll see they have these like options down here. I'm just going to go ahead and choose the sphere. So choose sphere. Just click on sphere. Now, if you did open up and you have a negative, or you have an empty screen or something, it didn't give you that window, just do File, New Scene. I'm not going to save. And then that window should pop back up again, and you can just then choose it. Okay, so if for some reason that's not there, just be aware of that. All right. Now, on the top here, just to make the navigation and the hotkeys the same as mine, you want to go to Windows, Hotkeys. And if you had chosen Maya, this will say Maya. If it doesn't, if it says one of these other ones, Mudbox, blah, blah, ball, blah, just make sure it says Maya, and then you can just hit Done, and you're good to go. Okay. Yay. All right. So, I'm going to act as though you have no 3D experience, because it's not, I think, required for this course. But, this is going to be kind of a basic thing to start with. So, the general layout here is that if you look on the top, you got your file, save, export, that sort of stuff, your typical file stuff. Edit, not going to really use too much of this. This deals a lot with like selection and that sort of stuff. Create, we're actually not going to use this at all either, because we're either going to bring in a mesh or we're going to use that menu, and you can see that we can kind of do the same things. It is possible to like insert lights and materials and other stuff. But honestly, when you make a model in Mudbox, that's not its final destination. You're going to take that and you're going to stick it into Maya or Blender or Cinema 4D or Max or whatever. Another 3D application where you'll actually apply the joints and you'll animate it. And then that'll go, you'll either render it out or you'll put it into a game engine or something. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to create like a really nice looking environment in here because you're not going to use it. There's mesh stuff here. We're mostly just going to use hotkeys for this, but basically it'll allow you to just make adjustments to the mesh in general. So like add subdivision levels or make it symmetrical, things like that. Display, again, we're going to use hotkeys for this, but you might find though, so for instance, see how mine's smooth? Yours might not be. If you turn this off, you'll get what we call like hard edges or flat shaded. And basically it just means that every face is perfect, has a perfect ridge on it. Some people like to model that way, some people don't. I'm just going to go ahead and turn smooth shade back on. But you can adjust the basically visual stuff here. We're not going to need this today, but this is how you might use this in order to deal with the UVs of the model. And that just means it's how you apply the textures onto it. You have to lay the model flat. But we're not going to use this to do that anyhow. And then render, you can make like quick little turntable movies, which I actually do kind of use. It's pretty nice. But other than that, we're not going to use that too much. And then the windows, we don't really use at all because these are already available over here. I don't think there's anything in here really that you need. Yeah, that's already all on here, so it's not very helpful. Okay. We're just going to stick right inside of this, the 3D view. A lot of times programs will call it the viewport, right? Some programs call it canvas. I'm probably going to call it viewport just because that's kind of the default. So that's what this is. This is our 3D space. I'll show you how to navigate this in a second. On the right, what you'll see are basically these three tabs. You'll see layers, objects, and viewport filters. Let's start with viewport filters because they're completely worthless. Basically what it does is it adds a like post effect to make it look a little bit different. So for instance, you could do depth of field And you'll see now, like, well, you're not going to be able to tell, but it'll make what's up close in focus and far away not, right? So it's just kind of like a cheat. We can do an ambient occlusion, which will add like a sort of weird false shading. It's not going to do anything now because there's nothing touching it. Normal map will make like this purplish, reddish thing here. You'll see that's used for something else. Really, these are not useful, so don't. That's just what they are. I just want to show you what they are. Object list. Basically, this is your scene. And it says everything that's in it. So you see we have a perspective view, top view, front view. We're always going to be working pretty much in the perspective view. But we can use this in order to get to things. Like if I wanted to bring in an image to put behind here, I can get to it through here. Once in a while, there might be something where we need to delete it or what have you. So here's the sphere that we're actually modeling. That's what that is. We're not going to use it too awful much. And then the layers panel is pretty much the main one we're going to use. You're going to notice that the layers panel is broken up into two chunks. There's sculpting and painting. So typically what you do is you stay in the sculpting tab and then you make sculpt layers. We're not going to do that today, but you just click on this and you make different layers, kind of like in Photoshop. And Paint works the same way, also uses layers. And you sculpt in here, and then your sculpting gets saved to the layers you create, or your paint gets saved to the layers that you paint. And that's what this is for. Okay, but you can do little adjustments to things. It even has blending modes, and you can change the opacity or strength of it. Right up there. Okay. Now underneath it, here is the properties, and this will show whatever you currently have selected. So if I select, let's say, the sculpting tool, it's going to show this sculpting tool's options. Okay. Now, for some reason, you're on the sculpting tool and there's nothing here. Just click back on it again, and it will pop up. Okay. So all the tools or whatever you're currently doing that has settings, be it paint or whatever it is, they will all have their settings basically right here. So it's almost like the tool settings, but it's properties because it's not just the tools, it's to everything. So you'll be using this a lot. Yeah, so there's that. Now down here we have these tabs. This program is actually relatively simple compared to other ones. So we have our sculpting tools. You can see them down here. All right, so there's all these different ones. You can try playing around with them. That's probably what I would suggest doing. Just doodle around with them, see what each one does. I'm not going to go through and explain each and every one to you. To be honest, I will only use like 3 of them because you don't really need the other ones that much. I don't find them super duper handy. A lot of them are only good for like a very specific use that you need this one time. Most of the time, you don't need a lot of them. All right, but these are the sculpting tools. Then the next tab, these are all of our painting tools. Okay, and then we have curve tools. Curves are used for a couple different things. You can use them to draw lines on the model, and then you can use them like a ruler. So your brush will like stick to it as you draw across it. You can also use it as guides for when you do retopology. So they have a retopology, an auto topology function that you can run in this that will take your model and recalculate the surface characteristics, and you can use the curves to kind of help guide it. But it doesn't work that well, to be honest. So that's what those are. Pose tools allow you to create like little joints, and then you can pose the model. It does not work that well. You're supposed to be able to make a whole skeleton, but it just doesn't function right. Like there's something, I don't know if it's glitchy or what have you, but I've never ever had it work correctly. But it is good just if you want to bend something or flex something. But you're better off doing kind of one piece at a time, as opposed to trying to make a whole skeleton and then pose it. Then we have the select move tools, which really we're not going to use all that much either. This allows us to select the faces, objects, borders, I don't use that at all, UV shells, yada, yada, yada. Not very useful. Okay, so for the most part, today we're just going to stick with the sculpting anyway. Then the next set of tabs basically are kind of subsets of these. So fall off. What that does is it's basically like the brush fall off. So if I use this one here, let's say I just use sculpt, and I use this one here. Let me turn tessellation off real quick, because that's not on by default. Let's make this stronger. When I brush across, hang on a second. When I brush across, you're going to see that it's sort of feathered. Oops, I didn't mean to click. Sort of feathered here, right? Now, if instead, let's say I use this one, you're going to notice it goes right to the edge. right? See how it's dunk, because it's a square fall off. And if I go to this one, you're going to see it's going to be more round-ish. So basically, it kind of represents the brush fall. Well, it says fall off, actually. So yeah, that's what it represents. So that's useful for some things. Some other things we have, I'm just going to go back to default. That's kind of the typical. Our stamps, so basically these are, if you're familiar with Photoshop, these would just be the things that when you click on them and you brush, it will use that. This isn't high enough poly. What are we at? Let's do another one. Shift D. It's running pretty slow. That should probably be good enough. That when I brush it, it will actually use that texture as the what I'm drawing. Okay, so there's some settings that I put on that as well, but that's what these are for. Makes kind of sense, right? Stencil's sort of similar. Let me sure I turn that off. Stencil's sort of similar, but what it does is it puts an image up and then you kind of push through it. So to give you an example, let's say we turn this one on, and then if I brush, it basically, I'll hit Q, it'll brush through that. So that can be pretty useful for lots of different things. Material presets. So right now this is default material, which I think is this one if you hover over it. Yeah. Although if you'll see, if I click on it, see how it's slightly different? It's actually not exactly default. So I would say don't touch these. Some of these look really cool. Like you can put this on and all of a sudden it looks like, ooh, it's like a comic book, or, you know, this looks all glassy. These Metcat materials always look nice. Like this has got a nice kind of skin feel. But generally this one's really neat. But generally, you're better off not using those. You're much better off just keeping it on the ugliest one, because if it looks good here, it will look good in production. So don't play with the materials. These are just preset lighting. Once you get rid of this lighting, you can't get it back. So again, you'll see like that looks a lot cooler, right? Or I can go like this, and all of a sudden, you know, it's an evil, weird looking sphere, hopefully, right? So they got these different preset lightings, and again, if I go over here, you can see here's the lights right here, and you can make adjustments to them. I'm not going to do that right now, but just leave it at default, because the default looks the worst, and you want your model to look good in the worst conditions, so when it goes into production, it'll look even better in the right conditions. Because this will kind of give you a false sense of like, oh, my model looks good, when in fact it looks terrible. We don't use camera bookmarks at all, but all right, so that's the general interface. The last thing I want to do, basically, is this. I'm just going to do File, New Scene, don't save. It's to show you kind of how to navigate and to kind of quickly brush, all right? So, again, I'm just going to choose Sphere, which is what you should already have. So, to move, rotate, and pan is Alt, or Option, and left, middle, right. So, Alt and left mouse button, your main clicking button, that will rotate. Middle mouse button will pan, and right mouse button will zoom in and out. You can use the scrolly wheel, but you'll see it has like discrete positions, so I'm not a huge fan of that, but I usually just use the right mouse button. If for some reason you go off screen, if you hit A, it will frame the model or whatever is selected. If you hit F, it will frame on the cursor that's on the model, okay? But A will do the entirety of it. So if for some reason you get kind of like off kilter, just hit A and that'll bring you back, okay? Or if you're trying to like get into something, you can like put your mouse in that area, and then that will become then the focus. See how when I put my mouse there, and I watch, if I go over here, if I'm trying to work over here and I'm trying to rotate, see how it's kind of not easy? But if I go over here and hit F to frame on that, now that's my focal spot, and it's a little bit easier to model around it. Okay, so do this, play around with this a lot, just moving around. Just kind of swirl around your model and see what it looks like, okay? So what you see down here, this is the grid, this thing here. If you want to get rid of it, I usually don't use it, so I can just go to display, oops, turn the grid off, and now the grid's gone. This is the view cube. This will give you an idea of where you are in 3D space. So notice as I'm rotating, this rotates too. So if I go like this, I know that I'm looking at the front. So I'd want to put the front of my face of my character on this side, and then this would be the right side. You can actually click on these, and it will snap to the different positions. Right? So if you want to go underneath, so on and so forth. Okay? So that's how you navigate. Good? All right. So next, what I want to do is, let me turn stamp spacing off, is this over here. So you'll see that we have our sculpting tools. That's all we're going to do today. I'm not going to bother with the painting yet. So these are our, can I pull this up a little? That's a little better. Okay, these are our sculpting tools. So the main ones we're honestly going to use is sculpt and grab. The way you can select these, you can just click on them, but you can also hit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so on and so forth, right? I'm not going to use smooth at all. I can tell you that right now. I do use grab a lot, so I'm gonna middle mouse button, click and drop grab there, so it becomes number 2. I use freeze a lot, so I want a middle mouse button and I guess drag and let go. Middle mouse button, drag and let go. Good. Let me see. Those are honestly the main ones that I use. I may use these, but those are a specific need, so we'll leave those alone. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Okay. Move smooth over too, so it relaxes here. Okay, so I got regular old sculpt down, and I just want you to play around with it just so you get a feel for it. Okay, so I just have regular old sculpt. Now, if you hit W, it brings up the wireframe. Okay, so we can see these are our polys. So if I sculpt, you can see it's going to be based on the number of polys I have here. So what I'm going to do is hit Shift D, which will subdivide. You see now we're on level 2, and then I'll hit Shift D, and that will subdivide. Okay, so to go up a level of subdivision, you hit Shift D. Now I'm going to hit page down. That will move me back down subdivision levels. And if I hit page up, it'll move me up page subdivision levels. Only as high as I make. If I want to make another subdivision level, I have to hit Shift D again. You can also do it over here. Step level up, step level down. You can see the hotkeys and Shift D and Control Shift D. I don't do anything with that anyway, but just Shift D you need to know. Okay. All right. I'm just hit W. Again, that's right. Where are you? Wireframe. Okay. All right. So we've got our sculpt tool. What I want you to do, just to play around with this, is B is the brush size. So I hold B down, click and drag. You can do it over here for the size, but you see you have no idea what size you're making. So you're much better off holding B. And then M is strength. So if I go up this, it's going to be really big. And if I go much lower, so I'm just holding M and then dragging down, it'll be much lower. Okay, so let's go a little bit like this. So B, M, let's just say I sculpt something like this. Now, that is a regular old sculpt. That's what you're going to use most of the time. Now, let's say you want to go in. You hold Control and you draw. So I'm holding Control as I'm drawing. And that will go inwards instead. So regular old clickety-clack, Control. Now, if you look, you can see it looks very sausagey and bubbly and not that great. To smooth, there is a smooth right here, but you can also just hold Shift and smooth. I'm holding Shift as I'm drawing, and you see it smooths the results. So what you're going to want to do most of the time is draw a stroke and then smooth it. Draw a stroke and then smooth it. You're going to notice that a lot of times I'm like drawing, and then I'm just smoothing. I'll forget to say, oh yeah, now I'm holding Shift, because I'll just do it, because I'm just always smoothing out after I draw something. So just get used to Control and Shift. You're going to use them a whole lot, and then Alt to move. I think so. Yeah, just go ahead and play around with this. That should be good enough for this video. I'm gonna make one more video, probably, at least one more, and we're just gonna sculpt like something, silly. All right. So good luck.